Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us from. And a very warm welcome to our BioWednesday webinar today. So my name is Alicia Gallier. I am Business Development Manager at One Nucleus, and I'm delighted to be opening this session in collaboration with One Nucleus corporate sponsors, Fish and Richardson. So on today's webinar, our highly esteemed panel will be discussing the topic of what the US-China dynamic means for the global life science industry. I'm also really excited to announce that this is our first experimental decentralized networking event, whereby we are live streaming this content to hubs at Baberham Research Campus, Queen Mary Enterprise Zone, and Centrum in Norwich. We feel this is a great way to harness the benefits of online delivery, whereby content can be shared with less geographical restriction and also in an environmentally conscious way. At the same time, we are conscious that there is a desire to drive collaboration and deal making forward by meeting face to face. We are also delighted to have Lonza One Nucleus partners as supporters for this event. Just excuse me, I'll admit some more online delegates. Thank you. So just a word on logistics. So as you've just heard, we are recording this session for the One Nucleus on-demand content. For those delegates who are joining us online, please kindly remain muted with cameras off. And then also for all delegates online and in the physical hubs, if you would like to submit questions, then we'll be using Slido to facilitate the Q&A for our session today. So what I've done here is I've just popped up the details on the screen here. So please, using your mobile device, go to www.slido.com. And if you enter the 6-digit code 154064, then this will take you to a page where you can submit your questions, and you can do so anonymously if you wish. So you don't have to answer, add your name. So I will be monitoring these questions, and I will pass these to Mike, our moderator, towards the end of the panel discussion. So that's all I really wanted to say. So at this stage, if I stop sharing my screen. So here now you can see the lineup of our panelists, and I'm delighted we have Mike Ward as moderator. So Mike, this is the point at which I disappear and I hand the floor to you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Alicia. Great bit of multitasking that you're doing there, and pulling together all the questions as well will be useful. So I'm Mike Ward, a global head of life sciences and healthcare thought leadership at Clarivate. And it's my pleasure to be moderating this BioWednesday webinar, which, as Alicia has already said, is going to be looking at how current tensions between the United States and mainland China might have an impact on the global life sciences sector. We've brought together a great panel to discuss this, but to get the most out of this session, I would urge you to submit questions, as Alicia mentioned, using Slido, and obviously, we'll endeavour to answer as many as we get. I thought it might be helpful if I share some key data that we pulled together from the treasure trove that is Clarivate. Just to sort of highlight the impact that mainland China and the companies there are actually having already on the global life sciences market. So if we go to the first slide, as we see from this slide, China biotech companies are very active both in deal making and fundraising, and probably most importantly, they're having great success in getting innovative medicines approved. So, for example, a major milestone was achieved in September when approvals of homegrown innovative cancer drugs actually surpassed those developed by foreign companies for the first time. So we can sort of see that there is a huge amount of real activity. It isn't just sort of promise and deals and finance, but actual innovative medicines are being delivered for patients. And then if we go to the next slide, it's also here we can sort of see how important mainland China is actually for pharma multinationals too. So, you know, AstraZeneca is clearly the big gun when it comes to multinationals in China. But you can sort of see that the growth of activity far outstrips growth that multinational pharmaceutical companies are seeing elsewhere in the world. So the focus on today's webinar is to, as I say, explore the tensions between the US and the PRC, and you know, how it might actually impact sort of the life science companies, both in mainland China and elsewhere. So to kick off the discussion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their companies, and also briefly outline your involvement in China-European biotech relations. So what we'll do is we'll start with, we'll go Yuha, Hayley, Simon, and then Chad in that order. So Yuha, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Mike, and thanks One Nucleus for the invitation. So good evening, everyone. I am Yue Huachong. I'm the head of Europe Business Development and Investment at Scheer Pharmaceutical Group. So Scheer is often recognized as one of the top 10 innovative pharma enterprise in China. And prior to Scheer, I have the pleasure to work at Polytherics and F-Star, both right now in Birmingham. So it's really like coming home to me. So it is my pleasure to be here with you today. And I will tell you more about my involvement between China and ex-China, of course, later.
Yeah. Hayley.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Hayley French. Up until recently, I was the CEO of Upvote, which was an Anglo-Belgian biotech company. And we focus on autoimmune diseases, peptide immunotherapy. And we were, when we sold our company to a Chinese company, which is why I'm here today, we had at least 3 to 4 trials in phase 2 ongoing. So we were established biotech, and then we started to explore the Chinese space, and then ended up being acquired by a Chinese company called Walk Pharmaceuticals in September.
Great, thanks. And Simon.
Yeah, hi, Mike, Simon Howarth. Just one thing I could do with the Slido code, I wasn't quick enough to write it down. If someone could sing that out for me.
I can indeed. It's 154.
Yeah.
064.
There we go. I can talk to myself then. Good. So Simon Howarth, I have been engaged with China for a bit now. I have 3 different activities. One is a UK-based healthcare AI company called Intelligent Omics that we've set up in China with a subsidiary, which happens to be in Wuhan. I have a fund we're establishing to bring UK companies into China in Shanghai, and an advisory business that's really arisen out of questions I've had in this last 2 years by UK biotechs and people coming to me and saying, look, we need to know about China. I have a slightly peculiar background in that my family has been trading with China for, it's very nearly 150 years. So I'm generation 5. When my son went over, there is generation 6, and the book to prove it, which is in Chinese, so wait till next year, we'll get an English one. But long family connection with China, that was all silk. Now working with Wuhan and Shanghai, and helping companies come over there, investing in companies, as well as doing the subsidiary in Wuhan.
Thanks, Simon. And Chad.
Good. Well, I almost said good morning. Sorry, it's morning for me. I'm in Southern California. I guess good evening for everyone else. My name is Chad Scheer. I'm a partner at the law firm of Fish Richardson. We are I think at this point, the largest IP boutique left in the United States. I've been practicing, and I'm one of the leaders of the firm's life sciences practice. I've been working in the life sciences space for more than 2 decades. My involvement with China, I guess, is twofold. Number one, I'm primarily a trial lawyer, representing innovative drug companies, most often in Hatch-Waxman-based challenges to their patent portfolios. We have seen in certainly the last 3 to 4 years an increased spike in Chinese-based generic drug companies seeking to enter the U.S. market through the Hatch-Waxman process. So that's sort of avenue number one, let's say. The other interaction that I have with China is often helping clients who are trying to figure out how to manage and obtain sort of worldwide IP protection for their innovative medicines, and helping them sort of navigate to some degree the Chinese patent office.
Great, thanks very much, Chad. So as I sort of mentioned in the intro, so great panel, lots of different sort of views, different experiences, and in this sort of introduction, we heard one of the reasons why we invited them to this panel, and we'll explore that further. But Chad, it's lovely the fact that it's probably nice and sunny where you are, or at least you've got the sun up, whereas we're now all in darkest winter here in the UK. So as you're sort of just up and bright and breezy, I thought we'd get you to start. So you mentioned in your intro the fact that you're very much involved in sort of litigation, sort of being a trial lawyer. So I just wondered if you could give us a sort of an overarching comment of what are the sort of the tensions that might be impacting the life sciences sector, particularly also how it might impact companies that have actually attracted finance, both in terms of I'm kind of interested in sort of what is the intellectual property, are there any tensions around that, and then also the fact that we've seen a lot of Chinese backed companies go to the States for that extra finance. Is that going to be an impact?
Sure. And yeah, I keep my background blurred for a reason. It's bright and sunny here 350 days out of the year. It just generates a lot of ire among participants. So I guess let me start by saying I think that there was a presumption, even if unstated in the US, that with the change of administrations, there would be an easing of tension between the US and China. And it, at least in the recent months, it certainly doesn't seem like that tension has eased to the degree that people thought it might. So let me just sort of give one other bit of sort of background information before I get to the heart of your question. In addition to litigating and helping people obtain IP, in the last 5 or 6 years, my practice has involved an awful lot of risk assessment associated with mergers and acquisitions. It's usually brought in to assess the litigation risk assessment, but nevertheless risk assessment. And the answer to your question is not one that it's one lawyers always give, but it's not one people like to hear, which I guess the answer is that it depends going forward on what happens, of course, with the tensions. But there are 2 fundamental areas, I guess, I see as areas of concern. The first general comment. China has been, if you look over the last decade's worth of data, China has been a net importer of basic fundamental research. If you look at the research spend on basic fundamental research, China is investing in basic research at about one-fifth the rate that the US is, and about 1/4 the rate that Japan is. And I would say that over the last decade, they've sought to make that up by doing exactly what you opened with Mike, which is invest in companies that have done that fundamental research and are now sort of at the application stage, whether it's, as Hayley mentioned, sort of a company that has is in phase 2 or perhaps even further. It causes two areas of concern. Area one is the prospect for further investment. If you're a company that already has quite a bit of Chinese investment, are you going to be able to get more? And whether or not you can get more, I think in part depends on, in the situations I've seen, what are the obligations associated with that investment? And in obligations, I mean deliverables. Is it simply an investment where your obligation is to, as you generate revenue, to push some of that revenue back to your original investors, or is your obligation to provide tech, to provide the result of whatever innovative discovery you're involved in? The biggest concern that I would have going forward, and I know that one of the concerns that my clients pay particular attention to, is if the deliverable is tech, are export restrictions or US-based export restrictions going to prevent you from meeting your obligations? And is there sort of a way around that? I think, all in all, whether it's further investment, whether it's these various obligations, and then I'll stop talking about others weigh in, because I'm sure they're more well informed than I am. But all of these are things that certainly, as we assess deals on the legal side, we're paying way more attention to, especially when the money is coming from a foreign source. We have to pay way more attention to what the deliverables are, whether or not we're going to presently be able to meet them, and what happens in the future if we can't, because some intervening policy or law gets in the way of meeting whatever obligation we have.
Okay.
You went on mute, Mike.
Mike, you've muted yourself.
Schoolboy error. I apologize for that. Simon, I thought sort of listening to what Chad said, I thought I'd sort of get you to almost be the sort of the advocate for the defense. So, what is it? What is the view from Wuhan?
The view from Wuhan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're not in Wuhan just at the moment, but you spend a lot of time in Wuhan.
I was there this morning. Where we are now.
So, I'd be interested, sort of, how through that lens, through that Wuhan lens, are you sort of seeing this, and again, how it's potentially affecting the sector?
Yeah, the first thing I think I absolutely agree is that there was this presumption that a change was going to come with a new president. And I think one of the things in Wuhan is they're bemused by that the change hasn't come, that it hasn't been different. And as you know, China, we have this concept that, when I was a child, on the back of every good, it said made in China. And now China is living that. China is having this concept of made in China, but what they're saying is they're actually going to create it in China, the technology and everything in China. And they're plowing on with that in Wuhan right now. And it won't surprise you to find that Wuhan has extraordinary support and funding centrally right now, and will be an international success and a star of China. So there's proactive growth going on in that environment, and the slides that you had at the beginning, Mike, back that up. You're seeing the actual deals and activity. We are frustrated in one way, however. In the last 3 months, the UK side has become more cautious about China, and it's a secondary impact. If I deal with China, am I going to stop something with the US. So far, I've not found a proper concrete example where that has happened. The US has said, we're not going to XYZ because you've got a China engagement. But a lot of people, almost all the people who've not yet engaged with China, have that now on their agenda. Should we be doing this? And I'm not getting the same impact from China. In China, it's just, okay, let's go. Let's get on with it. I can't visit until after the blooming Winter Olympics is done, because in case we mess up the thing, which is frustrating. So it'll be nearly 2 years since I've been over there, or over 2 years. But they're getting on with it, and that's the Wuhan situation. But they are bemused by the expectation there was going to be a shift back to normal business. Thanks.
Okay, and we'll sort of come back and explore some of those ideas. But Joha, Scheer is a Chinese company and is doing deals with non-Chinese businesses. So I wonder if you could just first outline what the Scheer strategy is around sort of building partnerships and relationships with non-Chinese businesses. To what extent is it a core business strategy, and what kind of deals are you wanting to secure?
Yeah. So my personal view, actually, our industry, pharmaceutical innovation, is now truly a global tournament, right? So there is no way we can just shut doors. So ex-China partnership has been and will continue to play a very significant role in Scheer's core business strategy. If you take a look at our pipeline, you are going to find roughly 1/3 of those assets in the clinical development actually is with our partners. And majority of those from ex-China partnership. This is very similar to what you've seen with MNC, like you often seen a company's pipeline development is driven by internal innovation and external collaboration. Here's exactly the same story. And when Scheer's R&D continue to grow and mature, and this year we started actually our out-licensing campaigns as well. So just to, add a little bit on the output in terms of what Chad just mentioned. And so the partnership, hopefully we are going to see, is going to be in both directions. And for, the examples of deals, and yes, we are quite active in terms of forging long-term partnership globally. Just a quick example, in the past 12 months, I believe that we have successfully established collaboration with G1 Therapeutics, a company in the US, for their breakthrough oncology asset, and with Cardia Therapeutics, a company in Australia, for the treatment of glioblastoma, and most recently with Viveron, a company in Germany, for Alzheimer's disease, to tackle Alzheimer's disease. And all these deals are different. It's really kind of tailored to the partner's need as well. So whether it's plain vanilla, straightforward in-licensing, or in-licensing with element of a share purchase agreement, or in-licensing with options, we are very flexible. And in terms of which kind of deals we are looking for is truly identify the differentiating factors in the assets to serve the patients. I will stop here for now.
That's really interesting. So, clearly your footprint is it is global. So the States, Australia, and here in Europe. How do you? The first question I've got is, how do you actually identify potential partners, particularly if you're casting a net so wide? Do you proactively go out to seek them, or do they come sort of knocking at your door?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do actually proactively seeking our partners. Now I'm actually pinching myself why I didn't approach Hayley first. So although we proactively do this job, we do have global landscape. So whenever we identify certain indications is our, key interest, we will definitely scan the global landscape and we will approach partners. Although I have to say, through a financial advisor or direct pitching is often quite common as well. So it's really a combination of both, but we definitely need to do our job better. Don't miss another case such as Hayley's company. But that's how we do it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And we'll come back to sort of get your sense of whether there has been a sort of a change in the mood music as you've sort of approached people. But Hayley, you mentioned in your introduction you were the CEO of Upvote, which has recently been acquired by the Chinese company. Could you sort of give us some sort of background into how those discussions, how that deal was, put together, how the discussions were initiated?
Okay, sure. I mean, Biotech been around for a while, and like a lot of companies, we were struggling with financing and doing a deal with pharma. And as I said at the beginning, we had 3 phase 2 assets, and so the amount of money we needed to progress those. And so then there was a decision by the board, let's go for a sale of all the assets. Whether that's a sale of some of the assets, a combination of assets, we were flexible. And we'd even do incremental licensing deals if we had to. And we just went the traditional approach and went via some consultants, and it wasn't very successful. And I was sort of watching the scene in Belgium, and there were a lot of companies starting to have dialogue with Chinese companies. And I was having discussions with a group called Agio. So we engaged with Agio. And importantly for me, they had somebody on the ground there who'd been in China for 15 years. So we started that process, and quite quickly we had quite a lot of attention, traction, and very different types of arrangements on the table. So we were talking to VCs, private equity companies, and but just out of the blue, while those discussions were taking place, I got contacted through my own network from a company, from a CSO of Walk. And he contacted me because he was now CSO of Walk, but he'd previously been CEO of BioWednesday, an Austrian company. BioWednesday were in the allergen specific immunotherapy space, and they were very similar technology to ours, and we tried to do an M&A between ourselves in the past. So it's very good for us at the beginning. They understood the science, and that was always a difficult sale. In being in the immune tolerance space, that was always a challenge. So they understood the science. It made complete sense, the synergy to them. It made complete sense to us. And so we very quickly worked out that it was what we both wanted to do. And we got the buy-in from both CEOs, which I think is really important. So there's none of this, 2 or 3 months down the line, and then it'll go to the executive board, and then you may or may not get a yes or a no. We knew very early, and we set expectations very early. So we both were very committed and built the trust, basically, that neither was going to walk away unless something that, is discovered later down the line just wasn't true. So the discussions were very smooth. And from the time of the first contact, we bought the deal in under 6 months, which I think is quite good. And I just sort of echo Simon and yours comments that there's a very go-get-it approach. It's happening. It's not something people are talking about. And it was actually a really smooth and fascinating negotiation. I was pleasantly surprised. Lots of people talk about things that they don't understand about China, and there's lots of misconceptions built on very little fact. So it was a good experience from that perspective. So,
yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, so how long did it take? So six months is pretty quick. I guess it's Rainer, isn't it? It's Rainer Henning.
That's right, yeah.
At Walk. Yeah. So, so how important was it, the fact that there was somebody within that Chinese organization that you were familiar with, that you'd had a relationship, even if it had only been so that you'd met at partnering meetings, etc. How important was that? And then you also mentioned the fact that it isn't quite what you would expect. What was the one aspect of all those discussions, etc., that surprised you most?
I think, well, knowing Rainer was obviously very helpful because we didn't have to sell the science, and also it was helpful that Wolg had already been through the experience with BioMed and acquiring another European biotech the previous year. So a lot of the mistakes they probably made have been ironed out. And so we had a lot of a smoother run through the process. And I think that was a surprise to me. And, using my consultants, I had them in the wings if I needed them, and they'd warned me a lot about some of the Chinese cultural things, but they just didn't happen. And I think that's because we were very organized well up front. We had that Anglo-China team in the background, even though I dealt with the Chinese team to get the negotiation done. It was all done at headquarters. It was surprisingly smooth. And I guess, some of the things that were difficult are the things that are difficult with all deals. And sometimes there were difficulties in that if you were speaking to the more junior people, you wouldn't get a decision. But I think that's fair to say. You get that anyway. But especially in China, where a decision's not made and then it gets shelved and it comes back at you. But there were very minor things that were causing any stress at all. I mean, negotiations are stressful, so I wouldn't say it was easy, but I think that sort of commitment up front and the fact that we had meetings 3 times a week just to make sure everything was on track and we really kept to the timeline. I think both of us for our own reasons wanted to commit to a timeline to get it done, so we did.
Yeah, I remember. In fact, it was at a One Nucleus event where Sean Grady from AstraZeneca was talking about his impressions of working with sort of Chinese colleagues, and he did sort of say that that in the West nobody's got an idea of actually how quickly they get things done. So. Hearing what Johar and Hayley has said, Simon, does that sort of that resonate? And again, sort of from that sort of the Wuhan lens, what is it that you think Chinese companies and Chinese stakeholders would want from, say, for example, companies based in the Golden Triangle here in the UK, and what should colleagues on the call be doing to have them knocking at the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of do it now as a Chinese mantra is absolute, and it can be quite tricky because if you don't keep up, it stops, the momentum is lost. And so I'm really interested to hear you're doing 3 times a week, you had a schedule, you're working to it, that's all the stuff. And I think everyone on the call, panelists and attendees, must know about the whole relationship base of business in China, and it pervades as it really important. So you had that as a kickoff, which is great. I think the shocking thing can be this business about hierarchical decision making, that you think you're getting somewhere and then you find that the information's gone to the wrong person, it's just not gone up the tree. And we know that the hierarchies in Chinese businesses are very tall and thin. The guy at the top makes a lot of the decisions, and the guys lower down can sometimes be quite passive. When we've recruited people in China and I've been wanting to manage them remotely, we've had to be really careful, because if people want to be told exactly what to do and when all the time, that's quite tricky. But I think that the whole concept is absolutely. So what does China want? I think there's a change in strategy taking place here. I do agree that all the companies with phase 2 and the stuff are attractive, and there's pretty much no technology, device, therapy area that China isn't interested in. They're interested in all of it. The thing that I'm interested in now with this made in China stuff is And people aren't going to like this very much, but what China really wants is to learn to fish. China doesn't want to continue buying in from outside. So there is a very important concept of teaching China to fish. So if you're a platform company now, China's suddenly going to become a totally different place for you, because there's a real opportunity for you to take that cliche. So I'm interested to see how that pans through, and it's not been the case so far. So far, it's been, find me a phase 2 asset, and I'll talk anything before that, and we'll have a nice photograph. But that's the view. And as I say, I'm interested to see if platform technologies manage to find a way to penetrate this by this teach China to fish, as opposed to bring them the cod.
Chad, I mean, you mentioned that you do quite a lot of sort of your M&A work, etc. So, is that something that aligns with your own experiences? And also, Hayley, sort of mentioned about it's always difficult to do deals anyway. Are there any sort of specific red flags when dealing with Chinese partners? It might be a sort of a cultural thing that that somebody might inadvertently create a faux pas. But so what in your sort of those dealings with potential M&A transactions, what have you observed?
Well, I guess quite a bit, but if you don't mind, Mike, let me back up, because Simon said something really interesting that I just want to comment on briefly. This concept of teaching China to fish is a really great way to say it, because it sort of really puts the light right on it. If you think at a high level about sort of the tech development, or in the pharmaceutical space of the development cycle of big picture, you've got your basic fundamental research. You have sort of the next phase would be what's called applied research, where you're working on the practical application of the basic discovery. And then at the end, you've got the final developmental phase, where you're launching that new product, or you're improving on the existing product. China has always, as Simon pointed out, really excelled in that final phase, or the last two phases. And it's one of the reasons I think that historically China has sort of ignored that first phase, that basic research phase. But as there becomes an increased concern about the ability to export technology, whether it's, if you take the China view, import that technology, take a US view, export it. The way around that in the innovation cycle, right? The way around that is to put more emphasis on the basic part, on the first level part, on the, as Simon said, teaching someone how to fish. Because if they have that core fundamental discovery, it's done in China, there's no concern about the later tensions, which I guess rolls into the question that you originally asked me, which is sort of red flags in doing these deals. And let me just a general comment first. Over the course of my career, deals generally, and I'm not just focused on the ones with China, deals generally have become just orders of magnitude more complicated than they used to be. It used to be that a deal might be a written deal, the lawyers might work out, could be 40 or 50 pages for a simple asset acquisition. If it's a much bigger, merger or whole company acquisition, it'd be a much bigger document. I was working on a deal yesterday for one single asset. The agreement's 650 pages long. It takes weeks just to figure out what's in there. And over the course of the last year, I was doing a panel with several sort of heads of business development from companies like AbbVie and Novartis and AZ, and all of them said the same thing, that the deals are getting more and more complex. So the deal's complicated anyway. When you throw in what I'll call political tension on top of it, it makes it all the more complicated. because not only do you have to worry about, as I sort of mentioned in the opening, what are your obligations and legally can you meet them? But there's added layers of complexity of dealing with, and this is why you end up with, unfortunately, a team of lawyers looking at this stuff. A lot of them, thankfully, much smarter than me and with different areas of training. But things you would never consider. For example, we have an office in Shenzhen that we opened maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and we aren't allowed to give that office access to our network because of US-based laws on internet and intranet and those types of things. So there's an added layer of complexity over not only obligations of what the agreement's going to require, but now there's another layer, which is what happens to the agreement if whatever the obligation that you're entering into all of a sudden can't be met because of some change in circumstance, some change in law. And how do you deal with that, both from an agreement legal point of view, but also from a monetary point of view? So I could dive into the weeds and give lots of red flags, but just at a high level, I guess I would just leave it at these types of deals, especially deals with China, add a layer of complexity that often we don't have to deal with.
Right. So Joha, it was interesting, what Hayley was saying about, how they ended up selling to Warg, and part of it was in fact that there was a local representation of the company. There were actually individuals who have executive positions within that Chinese company that Hayley was already familiar with. So I'm just sort of interested to understand, when Simseer is looking to establish relationships with foreign businesses, do you do it through the sort of the mothership, through the sort of the parent back in China, or are the deals between sort of the foreign company and a regional representative affiliate of Simseer?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, and if I may just tease it apart, because I think there are a few different elements here. So if you're talking about establishing partnership, building trust, and then make the deal happening, then it is actually most likely led by local partners, like have a local to local conversation. But we always involve larger team, let's say, from different functions. So we are introducing our potential partners at a very early stage to show our capability, show our commitment, and by presenting the function has key stakeholders and to make them to trust us. And during COVID, we even make a video. It's kind of, how shall I say, it's an interactive video that you can see Simseer, different sides of Simseer, different location, and including the US, not including Europe, because we just have one office. So really to make sure that the initial trust building phase is very well done. And we built this foundation. And when you talk about actually signing a deal and make sure that, for example, if it's doing clinical development in China, or even some part of discovery work, and then commercialize in China, then perhaps make more sense to have a China entity, Simseer, as the signing party, right? Doesn't matter actually which party it is. In the end, it has to serve the partnership well and complying with local regulations and laws, just as Chad mentioned. So we are quite careful in terms of make sure that we tick all the boxes. It is a challenging time, but I echo what Simon and Hayley has just mentioned. The mentality is there. We just march on. We just get it done, and doesn't matter people are on board or people still start to actually just pause and observe. We will carry on.
struggling to unmute myself there. So yeah, I just sort of wanted, Hayley, is there sort of anything else that you would be able to sort of add to that? Again, sort of, you mentioned earlier on that it was interesting that some of the sort of the horror stories that might have been floated about sort of working with companies from China might be a challenge. So I was just sort of wondering, what were the sort of the big lessons that you learned from the Apitope experience?
Yeah, like I said, we did negotiate with the Chinese team, and meanwhile Basel was the European headquarters was being put together, and so we had that European expertise in there. I think just go back to Simon's comment about learning to fish. It was very, very important throughout the negotiation, and probably what brought us together was that we had to accommodate the research and development and the clinical work done so far in Europe. So that was really clear in the early parts of negotiation. So for example, our CSO is based in the UK, and he's one of the world experts in this space. And we also had the discovery engine sitting in Belgium. And that was very, very important to walk, because that's something, they don't have that research capability. They had a lot of money. They acquired the BioMed technology 1 year. The next year, they buy the Apitope technology and end up with a really nice clinical development portfolio with lots of news in it. So those were factors in our negotiation. And so we had a global team. And I think we were always thinking globally. I go back to the comment about it being global business. So I think I mentioned before, the challenges are really, some of it was dealing with the hierarchy. Some of it was, I think, dealing with due diligence, because I had to keep reminding them they need to do due diligence. And a lot of the young people in the company didn't have the experience of doing that. And so, they didn't communicate that effectively between themselves. And so that was quite an interesting, because generally speaking, some of the companies I dealt with in the past, the US companies, for example, would do extremely heavy due diligence before we got through the process to take it through the various committees. But this was a bit more of we've already decided we're going to do this deal. We brought the trust in very early. We laid everything on the table, and the due diligence sort of came later, and we kept going back to sort of same type of issues. And it was very important.
Please tell me it wasn't 600 pages.
No, not at all.
No, I've done one deal in China that was 2.
I'm horrified, actually, 600 pages.
I am too. But I think that is, I mean, I don't know what Wuhan thinks. The 600 pages comment is just underlined in black on my piece of paper here, digital that it is. Presumably Simcere aren't keen on 600 page details.
No, we don't do that complicated, legal contract. Maybe deals are not that straightforward, but legal contract normally is under 100, even with options and all bundles in.
Yeah, I used to be a freelance journalist where I got paid by the word. So I understand, lawyers are going to probably pay by the page.
That's what I thought. You're going to resonate with chat.
We can do some chat bashing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. Simon, so you've established a new fund, okay, and I'm just sort of, when you're sort of seeing all this tension, I mean, the idea, I think, of the fund is to encourage sort of European businesses to establish deeper roots in mainland China. So when you sort of look at the tensions, etc., is this you're sort of thinking, I might have missed the boat, because 2 or 3 years ago it would have been a much better place.
We had a very promising engagement with what I shall call a UK university. And just as we're going to get to a really interesting way of engaging them with our project in Shanghai, they literally stopped the discussions for fear of collateral damage. And it's all because of this kind of engagement with China. And it's been incredibly frustrating that the just in case story has had so much power. So that has been extremely frustrating for us. We're seeking to help people get access to China, and most of the biotechs and stuff in this country haven't set aside capital to do that. So we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to provide our team on the ground to engage with the Simseers of this world, and we need to find ways of providing the capital. So we're actually having to set up a entity in Shanghai. China is driven by land use rights. The land is owned by the party, and you have a land use. You have a right to use the land use, and it's an incredibly preferential access, and we have that in a particular spot in Shanghai. So yeah, we've been incredibly frustrated by the just in case don't school of thinking around this, and on the other hand, my whole 150 years engagement with China says it's just a step on the way. What we're facing now, it's a step on the way.
On 150 years, you don't look bad on it, Simon. So Chad, is
my great grandfather, I think it was.
So Chad, I mean, does that sort of resonate with some of the experiences? The fact that there are some people who are taking a much more sort of conservative, if it's with a small sort of reaction.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think inevitably, I do a lot of these panels where I'm the only lawyer on the panel, and inevitably there always breaks out a session of good lawyer bashing, which we have earned. I fully accept. But I think Simon's right. I think there is a certain cautiousness that I've seen of late that I don't know that I would have seen. And I guess it breaks out, and like, try to explain this a little better. I have two groups of client bases. I have sort of well-established, long-keeled mainline pharma companies that have been around forever. And then I have a group of startup clients. And the startups that I work with don't have the hesitancy that Simon's talking about, because they tend to be hungry, they tend to be aggressive, they tend to be very interested in looking for the next best, the next big thing, and are finding like-minded companies in China who are also hungry and interested in sort of that next biggest thing. And are working on finding ways around the sort of just don't attitude that Simon was talking about. That's my startup clients. My large established clients, it's a different approach. They are far more cautious, potentially because they have more at risk. But I have seen a much greater level of caution.
All right. So Alicia's got her hand up. So hopefully that means that she's got some questions from the audience for us.
Yes, sorry, I had to interrupt there. It's a brilliant discussion. It's just slightly conscious on time, and yes, there has actually been several questions come through. The neat thing about Slido is you can, and I should have perhaps mentioned, is you can upvote questions. So the delegates have also kindly assisted with which question I should ask first, because they've upvoted it for me. So actually, it makes it easier because it's directed at a specific panelist. So Chad, this one's for you. So as a litigator, does Chad have experience as to the enforceability of IP in China, whether that be positive or negative?
So on the enforceability side, I don't, but I would say that I have experience on the trying to get protection in China, and it's been fairly negative. By way of just a recent example, I have a client that has what is roundly considered one of the greatest innovations in pharmaceutical science. They have two main patent families that have been granted literally around the world. The earlier innovation, the application was filed in 2003. And that patent has been granted everywhere but India and China. And we just can't seem to get over the hurdle. So I unfortunately, to answer the direct question, I don't have experience enforcing IP in China, but the limited experience I have had in trying to get IP in China has been not so positive.
Thanks, Chad. And then Mike, feel free to direct this one to the most appropriate panelist. So there's a question around China becoming more of a state-centric model of economic life science development. So moving away from the US with more and more emphasis on indigenous innovation. Is that the case?
I'm gonna throw that at Simon to start with.
That's an easy question, Mike. That's a really easy question. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the answer.
That's the answer. Yes, it absolutely is.
Yeah. Okay. And what do we do about it?
Well, you can either join them or run and hide, because it's a fantastic opportunity. They're not there yet. We've talked today about, companies being acquisitive. There's a bunch of companies in China that in generic products that have now been basically priced out of the market the way China's worked, and they're all desperately looking for new things and new stuff and new technologies and new deals. Just get a strategy, get a China strategy, and get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about in fact, another BioWednesday we had. And I think Chad, you were on the panel. We were talking about super clusters and the importance of having sort of government support, even if it's support with a small s. And I remember you sort of actually almost like lamenting the fact that you thought that you support at a sort of a US government level was actually sort of waning away for the for the sector. So do you actually sort of see that this kind of support that is clearly in place means that actually we all have to deal with the Chinese, because there's no point in avoiding them, because it's clear that they're going to motor through anyway?
I think the answer to copy Simon is an unqualified yes. Either we're going to have to deal with them in the near term, or we're going to have to deal with them in the long term. Because I think that just generally, just at least anecdotally, what I've seen is a tremendous amount of support, whether you want to put it with a capital S or a lowercase s, from the Chinese government into the life sciences sector. And the resources, both in terms of money and people, it's tremendous. And as I look at, for example, my own clients, and I see, for example, where most of their scientists come from. Most of my clients that are US based, a large portion of their scientists come out of China. And what we're experiencing in the US right now is a talent crunch. Just across the board, you can't hire talented people. The superclusters, one of the things we were talking about back then, Mike, was this idea of, what do you have to do to create a supercluster? What do you need, right? You need top flight universities, both to generate the research and to produce the people. You need cities with diverse economies and diverse sort of corporate structures where people can find opportunities. And in the end of the day, you need money. And China, I think, has, in a lot of different places, all three. And so near term, I don't think we can ignore what's happening in China. Long term, I think we're all going to have to pay attention to it, because I think that with the resources that are being devoted there, I think they're going to leapfrog ahead of a lot of other places that right now think that they have good clusters of life sciences going forward.
Yeah, we're not going to look at ourselves there. So, Alicia, do you have any more questions?
We have quite a few coming through, actually. So
Wow.
it's a good thing. Just to explain, if we don't get round to all of them, then I'm sure the panel would be happy to sort of, I can pass those to the panel post event, and I can facilitate any answers. But there is another one which is coming from a sort of a personal experience. Martin, he said, when we were active in China 5 years ago, Hong Kong was the best place to be based to reach into China. Given what we've seen recently, is that still the case?
Right, okay. Who wants to have a go at that?
I can cover that from our own experience anyway. We started out in China in about 2012, 2013, and we looked at Hong Kong, we looked at Singapore, we looked at various sort of jumping off points. In the end, a funding opportunity came up in Wuhan, and we jumped in with both feet into mainland China. I don't know whether that was the perfect decision then. It's certainly the easier decision now. And you've got the two concepts of Shanghai and Beijing as great places to have your starting point, still have enormous leadership role in China. And then there's the up and coming, the Shenzhen and the Wuhan even, and these other places, and they're all great places now to kick off your connection. China is an absolutely enormous place, so you need to pick one and work around that, and then leapfrog to the next. So I wouldn't now start in Hong Kong.
Joha, where would you recommend people start?
Sure. So first of all, let me just clarify that China 6 years ago, let's say pharmaceutical industry, is absolutely different from the pharmaceutical industry now. So 6 years has happened, I mean, I don't know, fundamental change, let's put it this way. So when you look at China 5 years ago, I definitely urge you to look at China again. And that's the first part. I also agree with Simon. I would probably consider to recommend that you engage with mainland China directly. And I would recommend, from what you are trying to do perspective, the purpose, you start with where you want to end. If you want to build a local presence, if you want to retain talents, then definitely Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, Guangzhou, the Greater Bay Area, so-called, near Hong Kong, has a lot of lingual experts and talents and really high caliber university graduates. So it will help you to build your team. If you just want to have a BD presence, you can pick any top tier, metropolitans in China, and maybe Wuhan would also be a good, very, very good choice. So really depends on what you're trying to achieve there in China. That's I will pause here and to see if it actually serves the questions properly.
Yeah, no, that was great, and I think it's always a challenge when you get that kind of question, because I'm sure that people on this call, most people will sort of say, well, you have to be based in sort of the London, Oxford, Cambridge triangle, which is the one nucleus hinterland. I mean, they're probably right, but there is obviously a sort of almost like a confirmation bias in that. So, Alicia, do any additional questions?
Yes, we've got another one that's been upvoted. So, how can the UK maximise its life science output when there are powerful players such as China and the US to compete with?
Well, I'm going to actually throw that one at Hayley. Well, only because it's clearly they're already Apitope was kind of in a position where it needed to do something because there wasn't the support that you needed to be able to drive the company forward. So when you sort of reflect what you were doing at Apitope, what guidance or what recommendations would you make to to politicians or to Tony in his lobbying?
Well, do something like the Chinese government has done, but whether we got the resources to match something on that scale, but they changed things enormously to be global, and do things create things within, because we just heard about what it looked like 5 or 6 years ago. It's completely different. It's lightning speed now, and I think people from companies on the call need to get in there now. The money's there. They need good science. There's fantastic science in Europe and the UK, and they need the clinical expertise. Now that the landscape has changed and your clinical data is now recognized in China, they need the entrepreneurs. They're very inexperienced in that respect, from what I've observed. The reason why they can't recruit in the US is because they're all the Chinese nationals are going back to China, and they're eager to get into these companies, but they don't have the experience of running these companies. So I think in the UK, something needs to fundamentally change. And even though I think we do a lot of things right, we need to plow some money into making it more attractive based to do science and attract investment. We just couldn't get.
But of course, I mean, this the UK biotech sector is great. Well, I mean, I know it's a few people, but there is more money going into the sector. But to Chad's point, Hayley, I just is the talent pool here in the UK? I mean, when you were looking to hire people, whether it was young people out of universities, etc., did you get the sense that there was the talent pool, a deep enough pool to be able to build the business?
I must admit, we did suffer trying to recruit immunologists, scientists, and that was due to our location. So it's probably not a true reflection. We were based in Bristol initially, and then in Hasselt in Belgium. So that was always an issue, our location. I think maybe Oxford and Cambridge should have those same problems, and London should be more of a mecca. But just that was more of our location. There's very good scientific people in the UK, and so I do think that's just where you're placed. So there is a lot of expertise. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. It just needs the cash. Where that's going to come from, and where is really if you look at the UK now, trying to get some of the undiluted money in, it's so tough now. To finance our company, we used our Belgian base to actually attract money because we just couldn't get it in the UK. And
of course, I mean, the Benelux, I guess it's because of the success of, a number of their companies, particularly, made money for investors, that life sciences, even for retail investors, looks an attractive place to put your money.
But it's smaller, and it has access to the European money a lot easier, which obviously that's changed considerably now.
Yeah.
Mike, can I just chuck one thing in there? One of the interesting things when you're working with China is because the government there is so massive, so large, so all-encompassing, they expect that you have the same support and engagement with government. So I've never actually really engaged with government much before I started working with China. And then in the UK, I had to start working out who to engage with to get their support. So if you talk to someone like George Freeman, we've talked to him many times and got him sometimes to literally just demonstrate that the government is supporting what you're doing. And back to my hesitant people, at the moment, that's getting very difficult. And so you're over in China, you're saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, the other. And they're saying, what's your government support? And in a sense, your government support doesn't need to be even financial to some extent. It just needs to be support. It's just statements. It's just, high level engagement. And at the moment, that is a bit shaky.
We don't ask that question.
Good.
Mike, if I could make
Chad, sure.
a quick plug for a one nucleus event that we did, Alicia, you'll remember. It was we did an entire hour on just that question, the question that was asked about what can the UK do to improve its prospects in competing against the US, and it was aimed at the US, but and I don't even know, Alicia, if that's available anymore, but it was a fascinating conversation with a lot of lot of great people, and we spent an hour on it.
Yes, absolutely. We like this one recorded it as part of the on demand, so I can.
Well, what was the answer, Chad?
It was complex, but I think at a fundamental level, it's kind of what you pointed out to, Simon, which was this. In China, there's a lot of government support for this industry. In the US, we have the Bayh-Dole Act, which allows for government for companies and universities that get government funding to retain ownership of the IP that they develop, and has resulted in sort of a boom of research and development. If you look at the numbers of inventions, the R&Ds, the patents filed, however you want to measure it, the Bayh-Dole Act has had a tremendous impact. And in the end of the day, it comes down to sort of what that conversation where we ended up with was government support, and you can get at it in multiple different ways. But in the end of the day, government support for basic fundamental research.
Yeah. And clearly there, Simon, the answer wasn't yes.
See, sometimes, Mike, sometimes it's complicated.
Yeah.
So I'm really hesitant to cut the discussion short. I'll just try and get one more question in.
Okay.
And then, because I'm conscious that those at the physical hubs have glasses of wine waiting for them. So don't want to get in the way of that. And of course, if you're at home, you may also have that as well. So, but yeah, so this question is, how much value do Chinese companies doing deals in Europe place on IP portfolios, particularly regarding coverage in China, Europe, and the US?
Oh, so Johan, I'm going to start with you, because clearly you're looking to do those deals. So it'd be interesting to see how you guys look at the IP, and then we'll definitely come to Chad, and if Hayley and Simon have got some thoughts, we'll go there. But if you don't mind, Johan, I'd sort of like to you to have the first shot at that question.
Sure. To be honest, I didn't completely get a question. I think I was just trying to offer some insights from my perspective doing deals. So when we actually look at certain assets, obviously, IP is very important. And to also answer some of the questions raised before, probably the underlying concern is actually IP is not very well recognized, protected in China. At least from our experience, that's actually not the case. And we're actually pursuing our IP globally as well from Scheer's own R&D. So we do actually pay a lot of attention to that. But yes, there are many different layers of IP. When you have a technology platform IP, that's one layer. And then there's individual asset. Then you have composition of matter. And on the top of that, you have formulation, you have method of use. I need to say that the method of use IP often is not very well recognized in China because we often don't recognize that, and there is no protection. Often, not all the time. So I have to be very careful with what I'm saying here. So when you build an IP with multiple layers, very strong, and often, that's a very, very good thing. We actually look at the compound we bring in from European partner, UK, and US partner. We look at IP exactly the same way. I will pause here and leave chat to conclude and close, perhaps.
Well, this won't be a yes answer, much to Simon's chagrin. So the answer is it depends on who, in my experience, it depends on who the investor is. My experience has been that VCs care less about the IP, or I guess I should say, don't do as deep a dive on the IP in diligence. They might read it, they might see that it's there and like, okay, that they're happy with it. Whereas if you're looking at a much more established company who's doing diligence on an asset, they will have a team of lawyers who dive knee deep into the patent portfolio, and will care tremendously about not only the coverage and what's there, but also where the coverage is. and everyone has their own views about what markets and what geographic locations have to be protected and where they care the most. And sometimes that depends on where they're manufacturing the product or a variety of other concerns. But
yeah.
It's been my experience, everybody cares to a certain degree, but how much they're going to sort of kick the tires on that IP depends on who they are and perhaps how sophisticated they are.
Yeah, we do invest a little bit as well. So when we do equity investment, we actually have a very close check on the IP portfolios, as Chad just mentioned.
Another perspective is that if you take your company into China and you file in China, and you do a couple of other things, you become eligible for a whole different set of grants and financial support and non-dilutive funding, indicating how important that IP question is from the Chinese
Echo
side.
that. Yeah.
I think there's an important fundamental issue for a lot of the people on the call, especially maybe universities looking at where they file. If I hadn't filed in China, I think it would have killed any of the deals I had on the table. You don't want to be taking a portfolio around some products and you've got no protection in China. And if I go back 5 to 6 years ago, I'm not sure that everybody was doing that, or maybe they're still not doing that. But if you do seriously want to go in China, you need to start adding it to your coverage. I think
Right. Well, I think we almost lost Hayley there. But I think that's probably a very, very good point to actually finish on, almost as a recommendation. That actually, if you want to deal with China, make sure that you've got decent IP coverage. Chad's obviously going to like the sound of that, and that isn't a knock at lawyers, Chad. I was a journalist for 35 years. Journalists are the lowest of the low. So
you're more disliked than lawyers right now, at least in the US.
I was a recruiter once.
All right. So look, guys, this has been great. It's been fascinating. The fact we had a lot of questions from the audience suggests that the audience was also super engaged, and I'd like to thank the audience for their for the questions, and also for the fact that they worked out that they could actually upgrade questions to make sure that it makes the moderator's life a lot easier. We're going to be put out of work soon. We're going to be taken over by robots. So I'd just like to thank everyone and hand it back over to Alicia.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you to all of the panelists for your time. That was a really valuable discussion, and as Mike pointed out, the volume of questions coming through was indicative of how useful the conversation was. There are a couple questions we didn't get around to, so I'll try my best to facilitate some answers for those with the generous help of the panelists on the call today. So it just leaves to me to say again, thank you to the panel, thank you to Fish Richardson and Lonza, and of course all of the physical hubs. So for those who are in person at the physical hubs, please enjoy a glass of wine whilst you mull over the take-home messages from the discussion. For those at home, we hope to see you online or in person as soon as we can. And with that, I'm going to close the meeting today. So thank you all and take care. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.